Do you believe that a lot of people really feel that they are uniquely defective?
Yeah.
Do you think that because, look, I'm uniquely defective, maybe it could work for somebody else, but maybe not me? Is that part of it, you think?
That's been a very key part of my learning, Jerry, as I've coached a lot of people, is realizing that, I talk a lot about the fact that if something is unable to go in, people understand the context of something, they get the learning of it, but they can't seem to put it into action. It's because there's an identity issue.
Wow.
And sometimes people have this definition, and this goes back to rejecting your own attractiveness. If you think that something happened to you when you were 2, 3, 5, 7, 10, 15, 20, you made a bad decision, you never went to college, at 30 you got laid off, or your spouse left you, if you think that there is an event in your life that could make you uniquely defective, then there's a very different road, and it won't matter how many seminars you go to.
Wow.
But if you understand that everything is a matter of perhaps just as simple as an approach change, and then again goes back to trust. Do I trust you enough to adopt an approach that's different? Because sometimes even certain failure is something that people are more comfortable with, and that is a strange thing to watch, because you see people with a lot of wants and a lot of desire, and then you're wondering what's wrong. And one of the things as a good coach that you've got to get familiar with is a lot of people are more comfortable with certain failure than they are uncertain success or growth. A lot of times I watch people ask the question, but what they really want to know is, how can I have what you have without moving where you went? And the answer to that is, you can't. When I did the EAS challenge, the first thing I addressed was what I was doing to resist facing things. And I realized that up to that point, the thing that I had mastered in my 20s and 30s was how to keep everything hidden. Why is it that things are always more difficult than you think? And it's because your real resistance to it doesn't show up till you decide to do it. See, I didn't have a resistance to learning. I didn't have a resistance to hearing. I had a resistance to doing it because I didn't think I had the power. You have a single decision that you're going to need to make at some point in your life. I'm going to invite you to make it today. Are you a person who truly can learn anything that you need to learn? Seriously, even if it took you 50 times longer than anybody else, what difference does it make? After you get your degree, who cares what the GPA was? Educate your expectations. In this business, I watch a lot of people ask the question, how did you do it? And it always reminds me of A Few Good Men with Jack Nicholson. You guys know the part I'm talking about at the very end? He says, you want what I have, but you don't want to know what I do. And a lot of times I watch people ask the question, but what they really want to know is, how can I have what you have without moving where you went? And the answer to that is, you can't. And I wonder for how many of us were willing to actually face that, because the bottom line is, this is a business that really is very Groundhog Day. You will keep having the same experience over and over and over until you realize that you've asked that question. I hear people say, I want to help people, and that's why I'm in network marketing. And it now makes my skin crawl when I hear that, because I know that those are people that want what I have, but they don't in any way, shape, or form want to do what it took to get it. Because I do help people, but my goal isn't to help people, because if it was, I would be dragged down, because helping people often is not something that they've asked for. Whereas if you are deciding to do a business and you are deciding to lead, and in walking the path and seeing who follows, you are actually assisting a lot of people in many areas of their life, but you're only going to help those who actually follow. And you really do have to have your self-image clearly in your own hands. The first thing that I knew I needed to approach when I started this business, there were a lot of changes that went on in my life at that time, and I did not handle them well. I moved, got married. My marriage got in trouble right away. And I started this business all within a 2-month period of time. I thought that I would be able to handle all these things graciously, and I definitely overestimated that what I knew wouldn't do me any good, because so little of it had I really integrated. I knew it, could talk about it, and I thought that meant that'd be all right. I could handle it, and instead it wasn't. I realized how much head knowledge does you absolutely no good when you're dealing with matters of the heart. So you guys look and hear about the business and how much this is a business of the heart, right? And yet you feed your head all the time. You're listening to the tapes, you've read all the books, you come to a million seminars, and the bottom line is it really doesn't matter what your head has grasped. It only matters what you have allowed yourself to integrate. And so at 40, I found myself with a lot of things that I had learned and was disgusted with myself that none of it was anything I had integrated because I watched myself disintegrate over a 2-3 month period of time into somebody I didn't like, somebody who I hated, and somebody who I severely mistreated because I despised them. And I hated every time they showed up in my life. When I did the EAS challenge, the first thing I addressed was what I was doing to resist facing things. And I realized that up to that point, the thing that I had mastered in my 20s and 30s was how to keep everything hidden. That's what I had done up to that point. And I was proud of myself because I had learned to stop going places that would bring this part of me out. If it was overwhelming, if it was bigger than I thought I could do, if it brought up too much self-doubt, I would just back away from it because then this other part of me that didn't handle things well would come forward. And so I never pushed the envelope. That's what I had learned in my 20s and 30s. And I'd learned to perform really well with what I had compromised to do. And that's when you heard me say, I stayed in jobs where I thought this is the only thing I can do is be nice to people because I don't have any other skills. Well, any other skill that I would have tried to develop would have pushed the envelope and would have made me had to decide who I really am and would have made me accept parts of myself that up to that point I was looking for somebody to give me. I wasn't really looking to have to own it. And so for 20 years, I just kind of avoided. And then I started this business saying, listen, I'd rather not be in sales. If I'm going to do sales, I'd already quit that, left a 6-figure income, and then I moved to Texas and said, I don't want to live here and die here. Blair's business was here, and I went, oh, my job's to get you out of your job. And so I said, if we ever run across a ground floor network marketing company, I thought I'll use my sales skills one more time, and in 5 years we'll be done. And so I thought I was just going back to use my same skills again in a place that now I wouldn't leave it with a company, I would own it. And I didn't realize that I was actually embracing a journey of the heart that I had avoided for decades. When I started this, it scared me, but the first thing I faced was, what was I resisting? What was I using to avoid learning? There were several things for me. One was severely overeating in a major way. And then all the thinking that goes along with that. I've shared with my team that there are some behaviors that everybody does. I know it's not just me. Whatever the behavior is, the minute you go back to think like this, act like this, or go to these places, a whole personality appears. How many of you guys know exactly what I'm saying? There are avoidance things that you do, and it only takes a minute for you to. It's almost like an argument and a pattern that you can have with a child or a spouse where it gets so ingrained that all you need to do is look at each other, and boom, you already are in that pattern. You have these patterns with yourself where all you need to do at this point, because they're usually decades old, is even come close to engaging in it, and then this other personality takes over. Why is it that things are always more difficult than you think? And it's because your real resistance to it doesn't show up till you decide to do it. So can I tell you that honestly, the biggest fight of my life was not during the several decades when I was intellectually learning how to overcome self-hatred and all this other stuff. It wasn't that. It was when I finally embraced a business, so I thought, that actually meant I wouldn't be able to succeed until I actually did it. And then all the real resistance. See, I didn't have a resistance to learning. I didn't have a resistance to hearing. I had a resistance to doing it because I didn't think I had the power. My beliefs about myself were so strong that I was willing to listen to anything. I'd spent several decades. My whole library was self-help. I don't think I had a fiction book anywhere in there. I was driven to try and figure out what it was that created that black cloud. However, when I engaged in this business, I had to then take that library of knowledge, and it only probably takes one CD, one moment or statement that'll probably change your whole life. Pick any one and work it until you've integrated it, and I guarantee you, you will have learned everything you needed to learn. So everything else that you take in, you now know the process to integrate instead of the process to learn. What I wanted to share with you today, if I'm able to articulate it, is actually, in a way, kind of dangerous for you to just listen to. Because when you have been given the actual piece of information that you need, and it's been given to you at the time that you are meant to use it, and you don't, you actually become weaker instead of stronger. How many of you guys have felt that, where there's almost more self-recrimination because you should know it now? And so when you are given something that is meant to be used, you asked and it was given with the actions that need to be taken, and you only take it in intellectually, you actually heap more coals on your own head. How many of you guys have been doing that in the business? And so, in a way, it becomes more dangerous to be a person who just hears the words and doesn't do anything with it, because you become more hopeless with every seminar. More convinced that everybody else will be able to do it except for you. And here's the decision point that I had to make, and I was talking with my team about this, and it made me say this, which is, you have a single decision that you're going to need to make at some point in your life. I'm going to invite you to make it today. Are you a person who truly can learn anything that you need to learn? Seriously, even if it took you 50 times longer than anybody else, what difference does it make? You know, after you get your degree, who cares what the GPA was? Somebody today was sharing with me that she did the EAS contest and she is finishing her last couple of days. Sunday will be the finish of her 12-week contest. And I said to her, do you remember me telling you how few people ever finish this the first time they try? Forget results, forget being measured, forget anything. Do you know how few people complete 12 weeks of eating 6 times a day and working out for 20 to 45 minutes, 6 days a week? Do you know how few people do just that, forget results? Only 2% do it the first time. The scarier part of it is, do you know how many people who say they would like to do something ever reapproach it? You have as many times as you want to. You can do it at any 12-week period in your entire life. Do you know how many people ever go back to finish it who say this is something they want? Only 5 to 7%. 100% of the people can go back as many times as they need to, and only 5 to 7% ever go back to reapproach and change their strategy to support themselves more to do it. And so I congratulate her. I said, that's how you get in the top 2% out of almost 1 million people. You just don't stop. And that's the secret of the business. However, what is that dynamic that makes you unable to do what you know you need to do? And here's where I believe the crux of it is, and it was for me. And as I coach people, I realized if I'd known I wasn't so abnormal, I'd have moved on quicker. But I was too busy thinking that I was an exception, uniquely defective. I mean, here's the decision. Either you can learn it, whatever it is, and it doesn't matter how many times. If the outcome is to learn something, who cares whether you're fast or slow if at the end you've got it? I mean, and don't you think freedom would be a really good thing to kind of approach as many times as is necessary? And yet, if you're uniquely defective, there is a very different place that you need to go. The strategy is completely different, and you don't belong at this seminar if you are uniquely defective. And so your first decision that you really do have to make is whether or not you're a person who can learn anything, or are you uniquely defective? You do need to make a decision because the two paths are so completely different. And as a coach, it's worthless to tell you what the strategy would be if you can learn anything, no matter whether you're fast or slow, would be. Again, totally useless to you if you're uniquely defective. And so although I listened very carefully for several decades on a lot of pieces of information that sat on top of my head, and finally when I had to decide in this business, was I going to do it or not, at the point that I decided I was going to do it, that was when a lot of stuff that had sat on top of my head for decades actually took root. You just never know. You really don't, when those seeds will take place. And I'm going to tell you, after coaching a whole lot of people, it gets draining when you realize that people think they're asking you a real question, when in fact, as my dad would say, their very question is a statement of non-intention. As a coach, how many of you guys can see it better in other people than you can maybe see in yourself? Where by the very nature of the question they're asking you, you can tell it's a statement of non-intention. How many of you guys have had that with a prospect? You could tell. The waiter wants to be a millionaire, but there was no way. Everything else in his body language said, no flipping way. Everything else. And so you really do have to decide, because without this, you are really just draining energy from the entire universe. When you're making a decision here between these two things, you really do have to be real honest, because one is, if you're uniquely defective, you need to go to people who help people who are uniquely defective. I don't know if it's a psychiatrist. I don't know if it's drugs. I don't know if it's a hypnotherapist. I don't know what it is. But if you have some unique defect, and A lot of people feel like they need to remember the moments of when their doubts came in. You guys are like that. I've been on a search forever and a day to find the moment that it all started. How many of you guys seriously? The belief that if I only remembered or knew what started the doubt or what started these beliefs or why I'm no good or why I'm slow or how many of you guys seriously, you're lying if you're not raising your hand because I know it's more of you seriously are on a search because if I only knew, then I'd be able to let it go. How many of you guys believe that? Because I believed that for a really long time. And when David and I were talking, I said, you know what's funny? I said, why do you feel like you have to know when it all started? What would happen? Let's say you were able to remember it was when you were 4 years old. Some traumatic event happened and you remembered it. That's it. David said to me, well, I think that at that point then, my belief is, he said, that it's easier to just break through and go on. And I said, you know what? That's not true. All that means is you've decided that's the moment that now you're ready to learn the other things that you needed to learn. For some reason, that moment of figuring that out in time allowed you then to say, okay, now I'll learn the stuff that I needed to learn. But I refused to learn it until I remember why I even have it. That can be a wild goose chase. There are times when you are meant to know something and it's delivered to you. Yes. And then there are times when you go on a wild goose chase for something and you know what? It is just your way of having a huge mission statement of non-intention. I have a desire to be in the world as I should be and I have a desire to use my gifts, but there's a reason why I could never do that. And my statement of non-intention will always be there to protect me from ever having to grow up. There were many, many years, and I'll tell you, the questions you ask you need to be really careful of, and the people that you place your trust in to answer these questions you have to be really careful of, because you could end up with all kinds of labels on yourself. All kinds of different labels about, well, there's a reason why, you know, you're ADD, you're DFI, you're ABC, you're YQO, and then there's the DMN, which means it don't mean nothing. Because at the point that you decide enough is enough, I mean, there's enough stories, but you know, nobody studies them enough. It's neat that the point that you decide schizophrenia isn't going to stop you, that's when you start watching It's a Beautiful Mind and you go, I'm going to be like him. I'm not going to be like the majority of people that will never decide to turn their mind away from what seems so real but is a lie. So you have to decide what it is you're going to study because there are plenty of excuses. There are plenty of people's lives to hide behind. 75% of marriages don't last. So do you want to look at those and never get married? Or are you going to get married and actually be the one that doesn't do that? I mean, which story do you want? Are you a person that can learn or truly are you uniquely defective? And if you're uniquely defective, then you might as well figure that out and rest. But the reason why you keep wrestling is because you know it's a lie. There's a part of you that will not sit down and buy that lie. There's a part of you consciously that wants that statement of non-intention to protect you from ever having to step up and grow up. But then there's a part of you that will not sit down to that lie. And that's why you sit in places like this, around people like this, and continue to listen to things because there's a part of you that will not buy that lie. And one day, it will get to the place where nothing will be different. Not a daggone thing will be different. You will just decide today's the day I'm sick of my own stuff. And at that point, you will turn your head toward every story that shows it doesn't have to be like you've always told yourself it is. For a lot of years, I thought you needed to remember what it is that creates whatever the internal feelings are that you have, this internal fish tank of feelings. And when a fish is sick, you don't treat the fish, you treat the water. And so I kept thinking that I had to somehow do anything other than jump out of one tank and jump into another. And there are plenty of people to tell you all kinds of things. I come from a history of people who are seriously mentally ill. I had a good friend of mine who wanted to do a genogram. He was studying to get his master's degree in counseling, and he said, Artemis, would you do this with me? We're good friends. Can I and I was like, sure. I figured it'd be fun. I had never actually looked that closely at what the history was, and I was dealing with all these different feelings or things. And so here he is, tell me about your grandparents and their sisters and their brothers and blah, 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 blah. I had never looked at this, okay? And when we got done, I was like, yeah. And he said to me, Artemis, it is clear that you have a history in your family of beauty, intelligence, and mental illness. I said I was single at the time. That sounds like a great personal ad. Single white female. Beautiful, intelligent, mentally ill, seeking like-minded professional. It actually scared me when I realized, since I was trying to deal with this cloud of emotion that I didn't understand, and I knew when I started to feel this cloud of emotion, it was when I was out of the immediate situation. When I was growing up, it kind of was like, the external pressure and the internal pressure were matched, and so seemed normal. It was when I was out of the external chaos that the internal chaos took over. I think this is why so many of us try and find external chaos to quiet the internal chaos. Are you with me? Because then you are distracted. And then you keep asking the questions of non-intention because you have no intention ever of letting the external chaos quiet down because God forbid the pain would be too great. So all your questions are statements of non-intention because what it would mean is that you have to stop the external chaos. Bottom line, end of situation, that's it. Feel the internal pain and go, you know what, it's not that big a deal. And then it tends to quiet down. Do you understand that when you try not to face something, it's 10 times harder than facing it? When you face it, it really isn't a big deal, but the fear of the monster in the closet is always 10 times better than opening it up and going, he's not there. And so if you have never recognized this, it's important for you to realize that when you got out of whatever your originating situations were that created your sense of self and your feelings, when you get out of that, you do tend to want to recreate externally what enables the balance. And then you get into this business where doing that just doesn't work. And you don't have a job title. And you don't have any money. And there's nowhere to hide. And you keep going to seminars about how to fix it, and the bottom line is you are still in a statement of non-intention, so it doesn't matter how long you stay here. And so at a certain point I had to decide it didn't really matter all the things I thought, and the bottom line is I want you to know, rarely do you ever really need to remember it all, and if you do, it'll be given to you. It really will. The best thing you can do is just allow yourself to be known to find out that the person in the closet just doesn't exist. Otherwise, it will exist for as long. And here's the thing, it is so funny to think that you can outwork yourself. And the funny thing is you can outwit yourself. You can outwit yourself, you really can. However, there is that part of you that will never be outwitted, and that's where the misery is. If you could outwit yourself completely, it'd be cool. But the point is, since you guys know that you're the kind that keeps showing up in places that are going to confront you with the truth, you might as well just go for it. See, the ones who truly don't want to know this aren't going to show up, but you guys really shouldn't keep showing up. Unless you're willing to, you might as well just give it up. Right? You are drawn to keep showing up, and the misery just keeps getting worse because you keep showing up to hear the truth and then wanting to go, but I can't use it. And there's a part of you that goes, yes, you can, and the fight gets strong. Do you think it is possible ever to be the person that everybody likes? Intellectually, you know that, and yet how many of you guys still are trying to figure out who it is that everybody would be okay with? Intellectually, it's just not possible. It doesn't matter how wonderful you are. There is no person that you could ever be that democratically would be accepted. My God, even the president isn't democratically accepted. His vote goes up and down every day. Okay? So at some point, you have to just decide that you are going to offer what it is you know you have to offer. And if there's something that you know, you should just kind of write it down. Every once in a while, there's a sane moment, and you should capture it when it's there because they can be elusive sometimes. You know what I'm saying, right? You're so clear, and then the next day it's like, what was I thinking? I thought I was all right. But do you guys understand that at a certain point, it can be painful sometimes to watch people wrestle around a question that only they can answer, and they know it. And when you're coaching people and you watch them protect that statement of non-intention, long after they've lost the debate, even with themselves. Even with themselves, the debate is lost, and yet they hold on to, and here's the thing that I found just growing up, to be really honest with you, Jim Rohn says it's not the blowing of the winds. Everybody's going to have that in their lives. It's the setting of your sails, because the winds are going to blow in everybody's life, so it really is. And I thought, God, so much of my adult life, I railed against the fact that the winds blow, period. End of conversation, as if that was an unfair thing to have to endure. And when I started to actually open up my eyes seriously, not asking the question out of deepest pain, because sometimes when you're asking questions out of your deepest pain, you can't hear. You're not rational. You're into your story and you can't really hear. But there were things that people said that years later when I was slightly more rational, I could actually grab a hold of. And that was watching other people face same things. Now you guys are around people who are doing the same business, and yet here's the thing that you'll do. How many of you guys would say that when you're not making a lot of money in your business, you really can't afford to waste a lot of money? Better used on leads. But here's the thing that's amazing. When you have a statement of non-intention that is so active in your life, and the bottom line is, this isn't something you have to go seek after. It's that decision that you're uniquely defective instead of the fact that you can learn. That creates all your statements of non-intention, because it doesn't matter what the wisdom is that anyone else was able to grasp, because they, again, don't have that handicap that you do. They're not you. They have their own handicap being them, but that's different for you. And so, would not any one of us be just as qualified as the next to walk down the path to say that everybody can make it? Yet, do you believe that? No, you don't. Even though you can see that the guy next to you, the lady next to you, and the people 10 rows back have the exact same question. Am I good enough? Would I really be able to do this? They have the exact same question. You're like, okay, well, geez, they have the same questions I do. So I must be as qualified to walk it out as they are, and then they would know they could do it. But how many of you guys don't think like that? How many of you guys have already asked the question, what does it really take to prospect? And you've heard it said so well. And you've also heard people say that, what if in the beginning it takes you 30,000 calls to find your first serious person? But in that 30,000 calls, you also gained a whole bunch of other wisdom. It's the old Thomas Edison thing. He learned 9,999 ways not to invent the electric light bulb. And when somebody was with him when he had an explosion, the guy thought that he was like, this was one of his first couple of tries. And the guy who was with him wasn't upset until he saw him right over there that he was in like the 9,000 tries. And then he said, what the hell are you doing? You almost blew us both up. Haven't you learned this isn't what's going to work? What are you taking notes on? And just, can't believe you're still killing us almost. And he said, well, no, I may not have discovered how to create the electric light bulb. However, I did discover how to create an explosion. And at some point in the future, that may be helpful. Now, how many of you guys don't think like that when you realize you're not getting the result you want? However, how many of you take notes on the result you did get? Like scaring a prospect off in the beginning might not be what you were heading for. However, later on, that is very helpful. Trust me, it's true. So if you know that, are you willing to take notes on what your results are no matter what it is? And while you're continuing to try and get the outcome of the electric light bulb, you are willing to take good notes on the results you are getting. Whatever they are, it's good, because you know what? When you don't take notes on what you're getting, period, you often have to keep relearning the lesson. Here's my challenge to you, which is, this whole business is a transfer of energy. I was talking to one of my team members and he said, wow, it is such a responsibility to be a member of this team because there's so much wealth here and I feel like I have to live up to it. And I said, no, it is not a great responsibility part of this team. It is a great responsibility to be a human being on the planet. And yet very few of us will just grasp that. And here's what I said to him, you would never actively, intentionally hurt someone, right? He said, no, of course not. I never would. And I said, yet, here's the funny thing. We put value on all the wrong things when we want to stay stuck. When you want to stay stuck, but you want all the answers because intellectually that would make you feel great if you had all the knowledge, because then you have all the more excuse why you can't do it. I mean, if I didn't know, then I can't have an excuse why I can't do it. But if I've really tried, I've asked everybody, I've read every tape, every book, then I am uniquely defective because I've read it all. So I said to this gentleman, you really don't ever want to hurt anybody intentionally? And he said, no. And I said, but have you ever thought how self-centered this thinking is that you do and how many people it hurts? See, you never want to hurt somebody, so you would never do it, right? But you don't realize how much you rob energy like a black hole. When you refuse to accept these things as facts, as human beings, and in yourself, and just go, this is no big deal. I mean, honestly, I'm just like the guy and girl next to me. I'm not so bad that I need to hide alone and isolate every time something isn't right. I'm actually just like everyone else, and the harder something is, the more I want to resource myself, not the less. But in order to do that, you would really have to accept certain premises about yourself. And that is number one, you're not perfect and it's no big deal. And you are human and it's no big deal. And every human being that I've met, especially in this business, goes through these same cycles. And that is the nature of us until we decide that that's it. And you can spend your whole life. I used to really grieve over my entire life, thinking I would spend my whole time trying to search this answer out. Only my closest family and a couple of friends knew the grief. Other people just didn't really know me. I would go to work, I would work really hard, and I would isolate. So people would assume that I had this life that I didn't have. I used to sit there and I'd say to my brother and sister, you know what? They'd say, Artemis, you'll figure it out. And I'd go, you know what? My biggest fear is I'll be in the rocking chair going, yep, maybe next year. Just about the time I'll kick the bucket. That was really a belief that, I would never figure out whatever this thing was. And because I thought it was elusive and something someone else was going to give me, and many people will tell you that, and take a lot of money from you in the midst of that and waste an awful lot of your time in doing that. And so you really do have to decide who you're going to give your self-image to. And I would recommend you grab a hold of it. I would recommend that you realize that it is not a democratic vote what people think of you. Because if it is a democratic vote, forget this business. You do not want to go out prospecting the general public with your self-image out for grabs. You really do need to grab a hold of it and decide that you really are excellent at certain things. And you know what? You have a unique thing. Here's a question that I think it was Dale Carnegie said, are you willing to take 20, 30, maybe 40 years of your life to prepare yourself for maybe just 1 year? And I thought, what a wild question, because most of us look at many years of wasted life in our minds, and we don't realize, what if it was just preparation? What if the whole thing was preparation for a moment where your life story was meant to be told through whatever your gifts were? How many of you guys have found that the most impressive stories are just victory, period? Over odds, period. That's it. So even if you are the least likeliest to succeed, my God, that's going to be the most inspirational story. So which one of you is the least likeliest? You should be arguing and fighting for that, since that's the most prestigious and powerful place. But see, most of us don't believe we're powerful. And instead, really seriously, since when the odds are against you, that's where everybody wants to root. And those are the stories. Rudy, what are the chances? Right? And yet that story inspires many. So are you willing to look at your life where no matter what the odds are, the worse the odds, then the more powerful person you really are meant to be? What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with the fact that maybe all of those things mean that you are going to be the most powerful story, because the person who looks like they could do it, what challenge is that?
You were talking about when you went through the EAS program, the challenge and so forth that you went through, that I think the numbers were something like 2% that do complete, like 98% don't even complete the program.
Exactly. Only 2% of the people complete a 12-week process without judgment the first time. And then the thing that I was sharing with you that's even scary is that only 5 to 7% ever come back to complete something that they wanted in their life. So that tells people right off the bat that, look, 93% of the people are going to want it and never, ever do it.
Wow.
And you have to know that kind of coming in. That's not a bad thing. What you also have to realize is that 7% is changing. The 7% of people that were ready last year are different than the 7% that are ready now. And this is the thing that you have to understand about timing in people's lives. So it's not like there was a solid 7% and they're gone in 2004. There are always people that are moving into that category of the 7% that are ready to go. And you're the one that's learning how to recognize that 7%, take them on their journey, allow the people that are ready in that first 2%, and then know that some of the people on your team are in the 5 to 7. They won't get it first time round. They won't maybe get it second time round, but they will keep approaching it and do whatever it takes.
Wow. So Artemis, I think another really powerful point that you brought up in this session really was something about Thomas Edison. I thought it was a very, very powerful. Thomas Edison was obviously looking for ways to develop this light bulb and so forth. And it got to a certain point. He actually blew up something I think you were talking about.
Right.
He actually blew up and there was an explosion that took place. And someone was talking with him, I believe, that you were talking about. And he's like, you're blowing up stuff. You might as well give up on this light bulb. He said, the interesting thing is I found out how to blow up something.
That's it.
And, that may become useful at some point.
That's it. I tell people in that first year, when you're having trouble and sometimes you're not signing people up as rapidly as you'd like, you're scaring them off. I said, there comes a time when learning how to scare people off is a good thing. Take good notes, because later on, there's some people that are going to want to work with you and you're going to want to have to scare them off, but really to take notes balance and realize that, there is a place for every experience. And here's the other thing you got to really look at. The older I get, the more I realize that I'm given certain experiences and they actually are for something else. And I've really started to recognize that when certain things happen now, I can almost stop in slow motion and go, wow, I wonder where this will fit in. Whereas so often we're used to rejecting our experiences and not wondering, what if 100 people who are going to be my top leaders needed to know this. And so therefore, a year before I even meet them, I'm going to go through this experience, but I blew that off and thought that was part of failure and I quit. Instead of that experience alone will be why a whole bunch of people are led to me.
Yeah.
And so you never realize, embrace that. There's certain things, if you could only know the meaning of what things were meant to happen and why, you'd probably embrace them a lot more quickly. And so would have I.
Wow.
If I wish I'd have caught on earlier.
And the challenge is we make up meanings
that
has nothing to do with what's really going to end up happening.
That's it, because we're afraid to cooperate. We're afraid to just wait and see. You know what? A friend of mine said, just put it in a suspensions file. Too often we have things we want to file it away rejected.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of things in life that it's like, you know what? This is what it would mean to me if I closed the book today, but what if I just put it in a suspension file? Because I may not know the meaning of this right now.
Wow. And instead of putting it in that file, they just choose not to learn from it now or, later. And what ends up happening, a lot of times they get this negative energy over them. And you were talking about that this business is a transfer of energy.
Yeah.
And some people kind of turn into these little black holes, kind of sucking out all the positive energy out of other people. How do you deal with people who are like these little black holes that are kind of like hovering around you, trying to just suck all of the light out of you? How do you deal with people like that? Because, we encounter these people, in network marketing who they really do their best to kind of get you to zap all your energy.
They do. And this is where I talk to people and say, listen, you got to be really key here. If your business you think is about pleasing people, you're going to get caught here. Because you're going to try and please these people. And then when you do, they're going to stay around you. The way I found it to be really key is that I know the things that I'm meant to be doing and there are requirements for my time. And the people who are black holes and the people that are most draining are unwilling usually to work. And so when I put requirements on my time, this took almost 3 years into my business before I said, you know what, instead of just giving my time thinking that will get them to work, I would say to people, listen, let's get together in 2 weeks. Let's set something in place where you begin these few things and then we'll get together. And that took care of about 99% of the requests for my time from those kind of people.
Wow.
What if you let down your statements of non-intention before you left? Where you had no excuse. No reason, no matter what it is that you're not good at, no matter how it is that you feel about yourself. We all do. Bottom line is I haven't met very many people that feel great about themselves out of the gate. Most people had to learn it. And, if you didn't learn it when you were a kid, learn it in your teens. If you didn't learn it in your teens, learn it in your 20s. If you're slow on the gun, learn it in your 40s and 50s. I did. I don't really care. I'm just really happy that I didn't live another 40, accepting and deciding that that was just how it was going to be because other people said that's the way it was. I'm really glad that for whatever the reason, network marketing was the avenue that brought trustworthy people who stayed around while I failed miserably to the point where I faced myself honestly. Did you hear what I just said? Network marketing brought me around people who were trustworthy, where I could fail enough times in front of them that I could face myself honestly. Really didn't have anything to do with anybody else, did it? Just by the very nature of wanting to do this. And like I said, all of you guys are like that or you wouldn't be here. And like I said, since you're going to keep showing up in places where truth is told, you might as well hand it up, give it up, and go for it. I was able to fail enough in front of people, not because that was my intention, because if I really thought about that, that was the hardest thing to do. And for most of us, we just don't want to uncloak it and just go, you know what, we all are Superman and we all are Clark Kent. And yet, your decision to live as Clark Kent and then mourn the fact that you don't have Superman inside you is ridiculous, since that really is just the bottom line of human nature. It is both. And as often as you want to go into the phone booth is as often as you want to go in. So what would happen if you just allowed those statements of non-intention to be something that you said, yep, those are there and I'm moving on anyway? I'm not good at prospecting, so what? That's nothing that 100,000 contacts won't get rid of. But here's the thing, like I said, people want to know what it is you did, but then they really want to know how to do what you did without doing what you did. How can I have all the same things that you've got, but I don't want it to be painful, uncomfortable, be anything I don't want to do, and I also want to be able to just kind of sit on my duff while I'm doing it? I mean, I had a guy say to me who's well off and yet he really needs the money but he didn't want to kind of face it. And he had some downturns and different things, but he was trying to hold on to the self-image. And so he said, we don't want to compromise anything. Lifestyle, this, that, and the other. I'm not willing to come on Saturday morning when you guys do training, blah, 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 blah. I got to keep living life as it is. So what can you do for me? Show me the compensation plan. I said, so in other words, you live here where you've got the money but not the freedom. You'd like to be up here where there's time, freedom, and money, and you want absolutely nothing to change, and you want to move from here to here. He said, that's right. And I said, can't be done. And he goes, man, you're a good closer. I sweated for a couple of years telling people the truth. Now I'm like, I don't care if you're here or not. And they're like, damn, what a great closer. I'm like, that's so funny. If I'd have known that, I'd have been a great closer all along. Do you understand what I mean? I mean, it's so funny. This is what I meant about the fact that you guys still are in a place, if you're stressing with this, that you want to please people. You think you can please them into the business, please them into accepting who you are. And the bottom line is a low self-esteem, in my opinion, is actually an overestimation of your importance. Low self-esteem is an overestimation of your importance. Now that sounds ridiculous, right? That can't be. I don't think that much of myself. Yes, you do, because everywhere you go, you think it's your fault. That person's in a bad day. They must not like me. You think everything is because you didn't do something. Like that is a very huge overestimation of the fact that most people don't even notice us. You really do think that people think about you that much? A low self-esteem is a complete overestimation of your importance in the world, and therefore, it is an easy way to take zero responsibility. It is a great place to hide. It is a huge place of pride. If people go, no, I don't think well of myself. No, you don't understand. It is just a refusal to grow up. Am I making sense? Yes. The only reason I can say this is because this is where I lived for such a long time. People say, what was your first year about? It was about finally just accepting this and going, all right, what are you going to do with it? And let's just get on with it. Okay? Overeating and self-hatred isn't going to be the answer. So the first thing is let's just deal with that issue. And then you can actually face the real things, which is just get on with it. Get on with it. And when I was asked the question after I won the EAS championship, I had to speak all over the place to people who wanted to do this contest. And the number one question that I was asked is, how did you stay with it? I mean, it's not that hard to eat 6 times a day, work out for 45 minutes. It's just not that hard to kind of do that if that's your goal. People say, how did you stay with it? And they wanted to know, how did you eat and how this and how, and I said, you know what? You better have a really good reason as to why you're not willing to go backwards. And I'll tell you that most of the people who ask for coaching have no real good reason for not going backwards. They want you to come up with it. I'm sitting on my butt. Please tell me why I should get up. And I'm like, next. I'm talking about people that are in the business. I'm not even talking about prospects. Do you realize how often people come to you for help and they want you to give them the reason why they should do whatever it is? Would you please muster up the reason why for me, and then would you please communicate it for me, and then could you please do it for me? When we first started doing this, there were all these other people that I met. I didn't know anybody in Dallas, so I ran into like 40 people who were doing this same contest that I was doing. And I thought, well, that's wild. I mean, I had a huge why. At 40, I scared myself that I could implode to that degree when I thought I'd already learned how not to do that. And I realized that everything was just knowledge and none of it was anything I owned. And at 40, that scared me because I knew my family history. Okay. We'd already done the genogram thing. I already knew it. Like if I don't get a grip on this, I already know the end result of this, right? Maybe you should look at your genograms. They'll scare you. So I already kind of like had a clear destination in mind if I didn't get my act together. I decided at 40 when I saw that, I really didn't think that was possible anymore. But then again, I had lived the life that I said, well, the only thing you could do, Artemis, is be nice to people because you don't have any other talents. Because anything else that I would have developed was going to push some buttons. So it was almost easier. Do you realize this? Listen, it doesn't ever seem like this when people tell you that, but I'm telling you, it was easier, even though it was painful, to stay in a place where I said the only thing I could do is be nice because I don't have any other skills, any other talents than it was to actually face and move on. It was easier, more painful, but easier. Okay, the more painful route, I will guarantee you, is always the easier route. People go, no, this is too painful, it's not easy. Yes, it is. It is the easier route, and that's why you're doing it. Energy, transferring energy, but you know what? What kind of energy is the question? And are you responsible for your energy? And are you willing to say, you know what? There isn't any excuse why my energy isn't the best. I mean, I can find inspirational music as good as the next guy. I mean, I know how to push the button as good as the next guy. I mean, I know how to pick up a funny movie that makes me feel great, as good as the next guy. I mean, I can go out to dinner with good friends as often as the next guy. I can make love to someone that I care about as good as the next guy. Okay? Do you understand? So, I mean, the resources that actually make you a person that changes the kind of energy in the world are choices that are not hard ones to make. And yet we grieve over all the wrong things. Are you with me? We put value on all the wrong things. If you put a cost, a dollar figure to all the things that you were not willing to do, you are far more broke than you thought, and you truly can't afford this behavior. So could we move on? But the point is, you actually only create a dollar figure to the things that are your future. And that you nickel and dime. I watch people all the time. Can't afford it, can't afford it, can't afford it, can't afford it, can't afford it. But you know what? Nobody puts a dollar figure to the asinine thinking that you hold on to. And I'm telling you, it cost me a lot. Several decades of life, which was extremely costly, and what I could have done, the things I could have enjoyed. You know, I will not get those decades back. What I hope is that the future I will use in a way that I can pay it forward. And I will never be more grateful than to the people that were patient enough to allow me to fail enough in front of them that I could face myself. Forget failing in front of other people because it's going to make you look bad. You know, you look bad when you don't fail. I love this little dog that my mom used to have. We used to crack up because he would do all stuff that, you know, wasn't supposed to do all the time, thinking you weren't seeing it. And then my mom would get upset, and they had these little thing where the dog always got the last word. And he would run upstairs, and then he'd hide his head under the dust ruffle. And his whole little body sticking out, and we could never have the heart to hit him because he thought he was hidden. You know? So, I mean, here's the truth. You look silly whether you fail in front of people or not, because you understand that you're just putting your head under the dust ruffle and the whole rest of you's hanging out anyway. So why don't you just bring your whole body out, get the learning, and move on? Because the bottom line is that is the way that successful people tell you they've done it. How do you get comfortable with prospecting? A couple 100,000 calls. How do you get comfortable prospecting? It's still a couple 100,000 calls. Yeah, but I'd really like to know, how do you get comfortable prospecting? It's a couple 100,000 calls, no matter how many people you ask or who you ask or how many seminars you go to. The way you get comfortable with prospecting is a couple 100,000 calls. How do you get comfortable with live crowd? What exactly is it that you say that gets you comfortable with live people? Talk to a lot of live people. Yeah, but how do you get comfortable with a lot of live people? Talk to a lot of live people. How do you get comfortable though? Because I really just want to get comfortable. Doesn't matter how many people you ask. And here's the funny thing. You can't afford to buy your leads, but many will afford to pay thousands of dollars to discuss inane things where they don't want the answer. Since this is a business of duplication, many of you have to kind of examine what your standards are for yourself. This gentleman that I was talking about, he said to me at one point, you know, I don't know if I'm worthy to be coached by you, because here's his things that he had. And I seriously had to write back and say, I don't know if I can be your coach because I just read your standards and I don't meet them. And so very seriously, I need you to tell me if these are seriously your standards, because if they are, then I can't coach you. And he wrote me back and he said, no, Artemis, not you. And I said, no, you don't understand. A standard is a standard. And if this is your standard, these are your external criteria that you've just said you don't match, I don't match them. And I'm not going to be a hypocrite in front of you. Okay? I don't match this, so I'm not going to coach you if this is your standard. And I wrote him back and I said, you're not taking me seriously. If this is your standard, I can't coach you. And then he wrote me back and I said, so what do we need to do here? What's up with the standard? You know? And he wrote it back and he said, no, it's fine for you. And I said, no, it doesn't work that way. And I said, rethink it and get back to me. And he wrote me and he said, so I guess what you're trying to say is if it's okay for you, it's okay for me. And I said, I don't know, you tell me. This is a business of duplication. Do you have standards that you want to be an example of what is unmeetable? How many of you guys have standards that are just unmeetable? In order to do this business, you need to not be human. You need to be somebody who feels great all the time, doesn't struggle, never fails, has no things that you're not good at all. Talking with people and doing things you've never done before can't be something that you're uncomfortable with. How many of you guys have standards and want to be an example of something that is impossible? Is that really what you want to pass on to people? Has it been fun for you to have a standard that's unmeetable? Has it been fun for you to have a standard that is absolutely impossible for you to meet? Has it led to more relationships, happier relationships, more productivity, closer friendships, any kind of income that was anything that you wanted? No. So why do you want to duplicate this? Because this is a business of duplication. See, this is what's why you cannot cheat this system. Because this is a business of duplication, and many of you have an unmeetable standard. How much is it costing you to remain in a safe place, unwilling to look at the fact that The only issue that you have is that you're human. The two things in my life that really seriously are the most embarrassing are the thing that are being used here in the greatest way. And that just still blows my mind, okay? I remember being in my teens, overeating to such a degree that more than what could fit in my body was something that I would eat, and I was sitting there stuffing sugar and butter down my throat at 3:30 in the morning and not knowing why and not knowing what was wrong and not knowing how to stop and just crying, going, what is this and what's going on? Who would think that I would end up facing that? You face the private things that are your biggest struggle. Face them. Overcome them. It doesn't matter how many times or how much practice it takes. Overcome them, and I guarantee you that the Lord will bring across your path the very people that need to hear from you. In the weirdest ways. They will be in your leads packages. They will end up running across you in the strangest places and ways. They just will, because that's how the world works. Most people want the stage first, show me the stage, and then tell me what I need to know, and then maybe I'll deal with myself. When the point is, deal with yourself, the stage will be given, and every single person you want to meet will be brought across your path. It's all good with the right filters. Give it up or make it happen. And at that point, it almost became like Richard Call, who is one of the gentlemen in our business that had done it long before. Here was his challenge to anybody who really wanted to do it. He said, if I took your children or your spouse and I said, if you're not at the top of your company within 6 months, they're going to get executed. Would you do it? What would you do under those circumstances? And it's like, well, if you could do it, period, then why not do it? Winston Churchill, when meeting a woman, went up to her and said, would you sleep with me for $1 million? And she said, yes. And he said, would you sleep with me for $50? And she slapped him and said, what kind of a woman do you think I am? And he said to her, we've already decided that. We're just quibbling over the price. So once you've established that if your family member was under certain death in 6 months to get the top of your company, and you would do it, and then we've said, well, then why don't do it? Then the only thing you're quibbling with is the level of pain that needs to be present before you will take action. Does it have to be that way? No, but for many of us, that's the quibble. What is the level of pain? How high does the flame need to be before you finally decide, I'll just go do it? It's not a matter of because things got any different. What level of flame do you need? When you really get to the place where you're willing to voluntarily be successful, you don't need a flame. The whole point of free enterprise truly is that at that point, you know how to internally support yourself and put yourself in the place that right now many of us externally support ourselves. At the point that you really have mastered free enterprise, it will be when you know how to internally motivate yourself in a way that at the beginning of this journey, you externally motivate. When you are finally done with free enterprise and you have really figured this out and decided this is the life you will live and you have actually really entered the game and understand the game, it will be when you know how to internally support and motivate yourself in a way that as you are starting the game, you do externally. The whole point when you really get with it and really get it is you know what crazy things you do that you love and you do them more frequently. You know that when there's a challenge and you really want to do it, you support yourself more. At the point that you are really active in the most advanced stages of free enterprise, it's when everything internally comes out and you are the one who is in charge of that. When you are on that path, you use external resources to bring this out of you. The thing that is wrong for most of us is we don't know how to continue the process. And we don't integrate it. We get motivated and then we go back to living what we're living. It's like he said about prospecting. You know, you're right in front of all the people, but you're not prospecting, so you then go to prospect and you're out of your mode. We do the same thing with motivation. I'm in a motivational moment. I'm feeling great. And then you get on the phone going, damn, I'm a piece of crap. I'm terrible at this. I'm never going to be good at this. You're like, what just happened? These tapes are no good. They're not working. And then you get on the phone going, geez, I just can never do this. I can never do anything. I never do anything right. It's never going to work for me. Everybody else it's easy for. Then you go back in the morning. I'm like, all right now. The ohms need to go to the phone, okay? I mean, this is like, you know what I mean? This is what we do. It's like we segment it out. You don't realize, listen, at the point, these can't be separate things that you do. Do you understand? It doesn't matter how many times you go, oh, if you go on the phone with all the self-hating behavior. It's like, knock that off, laugh at yourself, and move on. You take this stuff way too seriously, and it is funny how you could be meditating, learning, taking billions of notes, and go back and not catch it. I did it. I was very convinced by my arguments. It made sense to me. That's why I did it for so long. Okay? At a certain point, what flame do you need before you give it up? Okay? For whatever the reason, at 40, when I got married and when I realized he was scared and I was scared and we were both ricocheting off our things that we did when we were scared, I realized, whoa, see, when I was single, it was only me. Now, here's the thing. I always had the responsibility as a human being, but I actually didn't realize it. Now, if you'd asked me, I'd have said yes. But for whatever the reason, when I got married and he was scared and I was scared and I realized, wow, if I don't get a grip on this, we're both going down. Because I felt that responsibility to another human being. How many of us stay far enough away from everybody that we just don't feel that? All of life is just energy transfer. And what kind of a pebble are you in the pond? Forget network marketing. Anything that you're not willing to get up and teach, you should give up. Anything worthy of thinking should be something worthy of saying. If you can't say it out loud, you can't teach it out loud, you might as well give it up. Sometimes when you objectify something that way, you can honestly see that it's not worth holding on to. Are you with me? You can just tell. Not worth it. And this is how you begin to cut through the wheat and the chaff. You're going through something and you go, would I do this in front of a team? No. Okay, then I'll stop. Instead of going, no, this is true. I am this kind of terrible person. I am this. I am that. I am. Like, wait, no. Would I get up in front of a group of people saying, all of you who are like this, you are worthless losers and you're never going to get anywhere. So, all of you please stand up and leave the room now, including myself. See, you would never do that. You can laugh about it once you bring it out in the open. So the more willing you are to bring it out in the open, the actual more money you will make from it. First of all, if you're not willing to walk this path, you can't have objectivity. You need to fix them because you just can't stand it yourself. The things you won't fix in yourself, you are often active and avid about fixing in other people. Do you understand that you have got to be willing to face these things so that you have the kind of objectivity to be able to be a solid place where people can make a decision? Are they uniquely defective? Or are they able to learn? And if you're still a person whose message is that uniquely defective people really can never make it, however, we can try like hell. We'll never make it, but at least we're better than the damn losers that won't even try. How many of you is that your message where we're uniquely defective and the most we'll ever be able to do is just struggle and try really hard? So, that's better than somebody who won't struggle. That's not a good message. It's not the truth. The truth is, really, what kind of a pebble do you want to be in the pond? And isolating is probably the number one thing that those of us that struggle with this kind of thinking do. And then we come out with a nice play, we can play well with others for a little while. But then we must go back before we turn into the pumpkin and all the bad stuff comes out. And so you go back and forth. Go out to get all the good stuff and then take it in until you can bring it into the dark and it disappears. And then you come back out and get some good stuff and then you take it back into the cave, into the dark until it disappears. It keeps its light for a certain period of time, right? And then you come back out to another seminar, grab some more stuff, take it back into the dark until it loses all its light. I did that for years, having no idea that that's what I was doing. None. So in this business, if you can learn it, if you can decide between, if I wouldn't teach it in front of people, I'm not going to hold on to it. If you're willing to walk that out, your objectivity grows by leaps and bounds. As that objectivity grows, your chest fills, seriously, your will to decide that this is how it will be really just changes and your chest fills with strength. How many of you guys have seen while doing this business, your posture changes, the way you walk changes? Seriously, your chest fills, you finally are not just a mere skeleton, you get filled out. But the next stage of that is that you really have to go forward in a manner that decides. The strategy really is all in the power of decision. Tony Robbins plays, Simon Says, with hundreds and thousands of people every year, okay? And in that, he says, do you know how to play the game? They all go, yeah. So he stands everybody up. In 2 seconds, they're all down. Then he goes, all right, let's talk about the rules. Simon says, put your hands on your head and on your knees. You never put your hands on your knees. It's only when Simon directly says, after the and, you can't do it. So he lets everybody stand up. He starts again. 5 minutes later, almost everybody's down out of 2,000 people. And there's usually about 50 left. And so he says, okay, all of you who are left, Simon says, come on down to the front and get up on the stage. And well, they're all excited. Oh, give me Tony. And they almost all get running up on the stage except for 1 or 2 really smart people who usually stay down, catching on that Simon said, and come up on the stage. He has those last two people come up, he finds a winner, and then he sits everybody down and he says, now do you want to know what you just witnessed? People play life like they play games. How many of you honestly decided that you were going to win when you started a game? And usually it's somewhere between 30 and 50 people raise their hand, and all the time the winner is in that group of people. So he said, here's your lesson. You are never competing with everybody. You are only competing with the people who decided to win. So of all the people that I met when I was doing this particular EAS contest who said they were doing it, 6 to 7 weeks later, I was the only one getting results along with Blair. All these other people weren't, and they started to come up to me. What are you doing? What did you do? Well, I'm doing what you're doing. What are you guys doing for food? Well, we're eating 6 times a day like that. Oh, that's too complicated. I don't do that. What kind of supplements are you taking? Oh, those are too expensive. We don't do that here. Well, I guess we're not doing the same thing. Okay? I'm doing what they said, and you're not. So why are you asking me what I'm doing for results? Why do you even ask when you have no intention of doing it, right? The statements of non-intention. Oh, that's too difficult. That's too inconvenient. That's uncomfortable. I'm not good at that. What does I'm not good at something mean? I mean, how many of us stop there? I'm not good at that. It's uncomfortable. Yes, and? The time I decided that I was going to actually complete this was not the day I started my business. I mean, I signed it up saying, yes, I can do this, but then within a couple of weeks it was clear I couldn't. A rude awakening. And for the next year, you find out all the reasons why you're going to have a lot more to learn than you thought, right? And you can either be a quick learner or avoid that learning. But the bottom line, it was 2 years for me when I finally went, I have decided I've invested too much energy not to walk away with the prize. There was a crossover point where it was like, dadgummit, I'll ride the horse no matter what. And at that point, my business started. And that's when I started saying to people, if you join with me now, in 5 years, you could be done. Because that's what's going to happen to me, and I'll be able to show every single one of you. And at that point, that was when my business started. It was not at the point I signed up. It was at the point that I made the decision and was resolved it was done. And then I actually started the journey. All the rest of it was just to get to that point. All the rest of the experiences were purely to create in me the will to get the damn job done. Everything else was purely to create a desire I never knew existed inside me. A will to get something done, a you can't stop me inside myself, and a decision that whatever I had to face was just going to get done. Didn't matter. I don't care if I'm not good at it. I don't care if you like me. Doesn't matter. You know, here's the deal. I'm going over here, and if you want to go over here, then you'll want to follow me. I don't care if you like me or not. Doesn't matter if you like me or not. I'm still going over there, and if you want to go there, you'll probably want to go with me. Okay? Because the bottom line is there aren't that many people that can show you how to get over there. And I now know I'm one of those few. So I'm no longer looking to see if you like me, whether you reflect the right things to me. Do you see the objectivity that grows? Do you understand? At a certain point, I know my destination, and I know there are people who want my destination, and all of a sudden, I am no longer the center of the universe anymore. My low self-esteem is ridiculous, right? It's an overestimation of my importance. The importance is I'm going over here, and many people want to go over here, and I'm inconsequential. I'm just the person who is the conduit. It doesn't matter my foibles, doesn't matter how good I am, doesn't matter how pretty, how ugly, how uncoordinated. It doesn't make any difference. I've got a destination, and it's the same one that you said you wanted to do, and so I can be the conduit. Bottom line, end of conversation. Do you see? That's all I am, a conduit. At the point that you understand that's what you are, all the rest of the things that you fret and worry about, that you hold back on, you realize were inconsequential. Are you with me? That's the whole thing. And that's when your destination is certain and you understand your proper perspective in the universe. Your proper perspective. We are really small. However, we have a huge impact. And what's funny is we worry about the fact that we are too important, and therefore we take zero responsibility for our effect. If we would really accept our smallness and yet our power, we would have such a huge effect, which is what we're meant to have. What kind of a pebble do you want to be in the pond? You are transferring energy at all times. The question is, why don't you choose what kind? So you don't have the choice of not being a person that transfers energy. You only have the choice of which kind. You don't have the option not to be human. You don't have the option not to be energy in the world. You have an option what kind of human being you want to be, and you have the option of what kind of energy you want to be, and that's it.
So Artemis, I know one of the things that you mentioned is there are people who go around saying that, I'm not really good at prospecting. And you said, no problem. That's nothing that 100,000 prospecting calls can't fix, right?
There we go. I know people will ask the same question. When they don't like the answer, they'll ask the same question over and over and over again. Like, is this whole journey about personal growth, Jerry?
Ooh, wow.
And you're like, but I mean,
Could it
they will.
be?
People
Could
will
it
say,
be?
yeah, but I mean, like, how do you get comfortable prospecting? It's like, you know what? You prospect. But I mean, I know, but like, how would you get comfortable doing it? It's like, you just do it. And so
Right.
just really joking with people to go, you know what? It's okay to be very uncomfortable with the basic aspects of this business. And it is okay that really, like we said, intentional practice really is what gets you over it. And that is the answer.
Wow.
Being comfortable isn't really what you're looking for. Excellence always comes by willingness to go in and do what you didn't know how to do. It's like, where does good judgment come from? It comes from bad judgment. And bad judgment comes from experience. You know what I
right.
mean? And it's like, you don't just jump into the good judgment category. I wish we did, but then again, you know what? Let me restate that. I really don't wish we did. The reason why most people work with me is because there have been many things that I did not understand clearly or that were even set into me really in a very mixed up way. And in my journey out, I actually captured more than people who had it set right in them. Okay.
Wow.
So that in actuality, when people are coming on a tough time, I often hear people say, I'm afraid to prospect people because I don't want them to experience what I experience. And I have said to my people, you know what? At the 2-year mark when my business took off, it's because I wanted you to experience exactly what I'd experienced.
Wow.
Because it changed the direction of my life. And so I do not want to save you from that. And I'm the one that knows it's coming. So I say to people, you know what? I'm not surprised. Actually, wait, there's times when I don't even tell you something because I know you can't hear it yet. I actually want you to go through each of those stages. I hope you go through them more rapidly, that I can help you compress that time. But whether I do or I don't want to save you from things because, just look at weight training.
That's right. Look at weight training. Take a look at the butterfly, the cocoon.
That's it.
It has to go through that process. It has to go through that struggle, so to speak, of being able to break out because that's the only way it's going to have the strong enough muscles to be able to fly. So what you're saying is that being willing to be uncomfortable, being willing to go through this process, even if you get in a situation where you're looking silly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Somebody said to me, Artemis, how come you're able to create more stronger leaders than many? And I said, I think it's because I watched and know what I went through, and therefore I don't fear for other people. If you have really made it over some tall mountains, then when you watch people, having struggled in their first 1,000 feet, you're like, oh, that's fine. You know what I mean? You're going to be fine. You're expecting and and you don't fear for them when they're having struggles at 9,000 feet because hey, you know what? Been there, done that, not a problem.
Wow.
And you tell them how to navigate it, and you even know that they will or won't make it based on whether they listen to you.
That is powerful. All right, everyone. Join us on the next CD.